There are two really big games tonight in the Eastern Conference. We have Cav-Sixers and Celtics-Pistons. Now, those are three of the top five teams, or four of the top five teams in the Eastern Conference right now, with the Celtics and the Pistons being 1 and 2. The Cavs are number 3, and the 76ers are number 5. What can we learn from Cav-Sixers tonight that we didn't already know, Corbin?
I think we can learn that the Sixers are going to be an even bigger challenge to the Cavs starting as early as this year if they play as they have the last couple of games. Just this last Saturday, they scored a season-high 130. J.J. Redick went 8 of 12 from deep against them. But also what I don't think we see is that the Sixers have really had an open, free-falling offense. They rank second in the NBA in assists at 26.4 per game, trailing only the Warriors. And they're really on a hot streak right now. They've won 3 straight and 5 out of 6, and their last loss was against the Warriors. And with Ben Simmons coming back, supposed to be cleared to play today, and will be lining up against LeBron, that's going to be a good matchup. Joel Embiid has been averaging 22.4 points and 11.2 rebounds. That's going to be to see how he matches up. I don't know. I think we can stop talking about the Sixers moving into the future like 3-4 years down the line and really start thinking, hey, they'll make some noise this year and make some serious noise next year when matched up against a real Eastern Conference Finals shoo-in, you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think one of the interesting and compelling questions is that the Cavs don't really have anybody to guard Joel Embiid, and for them, that's going to be a really difficult situation, guarding a guy that we don't really have any facsimile of Joel Embiid in the league. He's 7'2", he's strong, he can shoot, he can dribble, he can do a little bit of everything. So I think the most interesting thing that can be learned this evening is how impactful Joel Embiid can be against the Cleveland Cavaliers, because the way the Sixers have been playing, you see a team starting to come together and start to be cohesive, which I'm going to be the first one to admit I was wrong. I thought that they would have much more trouble putting this together, and I thought that injuries would play much larger factor, which is still sort of the jury's still out on. We haven't gone through that phase where Embiid misses 2 weeks yet. And maybe we don't, but I feel like probably we do at some point. But this team starts to look really, really good. And if that's the case, seeing how effective that Joel Embiid can be tonight can go a long way to seeing what we see in the future in terms of playoffs. Because if they don't really have an answer for Embiid, it might be a tough playoff series for him. And you know, they've got LeBron, it might not, but seeing those two line up in the playoffs might be something that Cleveland looks to avoid. Not because they're afraid, just because it's a little bit easier to probably beat the Raptors or beat the Wizards than it might be to beat the 76ers. And while it's not a huge thing, I think that that's what can be learned this evening.
True, and I'm also interested to see how Robert Covington plays. I think, a Robert Covington-Jay Crowder matchup, which I haven't really paid much attention to in the past, but if they lined up, or Robert Covington LeBron, which is probably more likely going to happen because someone has to stick him when Ben Simmons is out or can. I think he'll stick him sometimes, but for the most part, I would trust Covington. But that would also be interesting because Covington's had a very solid year this year, and I think he's just now being noticed on a more national mainstream scale.
Speaking of which, I don't know if you've checked out the 94feetreport.com today, but we have an article from one of our writers, Jake Painting, who took on that exact question, examining what the value of a player like Robert Covington is. And his conclusions are pretty interesting in that, like you said, Covington generally draws their best wing player when it comes to defense, and he's a fantastic spot-up shooter. So, yeah, seeing how he's going to play out in this scenario where he's guarding a LeBron James or maybe even guarding a Kevin Love at times, it will be really, really telling of what the 76ers are going to be going forward in how well Covington can play this role.
Right there with you, man. Totally agree.
All right, so the other game this evening is the Celtics and the Pistons. Now, this is a battle of 1 and 2, not the battle of 1 and 2 that we thought we were going to have. But what do you think in this matchup can we learn that will tell us a little bit about the future of the Eastern Conference?
For these two teams, it's going to be good. I'm seeing a very tough, tight matchup. But as far as playing is concerned, it's going to be cool to see, okay, Kyrie, Avery Bradley. They've always been going at it the past 3 years when, Avery Bradley was with the Celtics and Kyrie was with the Cavs. So they're not going to put Reggie Jackson on Kyrie. At least I don't think they would. It wouldn't be wise. Avery Bradley kind of knows his moves, and even Kyrie has said himself he's one of his toughest defenders. So that'll be a nice matchup. And that also leads to a couple of cross switches, because then if you have your starting five being Reggie Jackson, Avery Bradley, Stanley Johnson, Tobias Harris, and Andre Drummond, and it's Kyrie, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Morris, and Al Horford for the Celtics, you have Jason Tatum matchup against Stanley Johnson. That's a good test. Stanley Johnson's a really, really stout, really, persistent, pesky defender. That'll be nice. Jaylen Brown, who's going to stick him defensively? Because Reggie Jackson has to stick somebody, and he can't stick a Marcus Morris or Al Horford. They just have the size and the length, and that's going to be something to see how that matches up. And even more telling for me is the battle of the benches. I mean, the Celtics have had a really gritty, scrappy bench, but their bench really doesn't produce offense, at least as effective, at least in the games I've seen. They've played really well when they have at least one of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, or Kyrie out there with some of the bench unit. So that's just something I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I thought I lost you for a second. That was what that weird pause was.
Oh, sorry. I would hold back a cough. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. So I think there are a couple of questions that need to be answered tonight, and one of them is this an Aaron Baines game? The Celtics have been doing this thing where they flip their starting lineup, where Marcus Morris starts sometimes, and obviously his knee is not quite where they want it to be, so he's been taking some time off. But against teams that have dominant centers, like Andre Drummond, the Celtics tend to start Aaron Baines in place of Morris and flip Horford over to the power forward. So the first question for me is this an Aaron Baines game? And I feel like it might be. Now, this question is going to be answered in about 3 hours, and we'll know that. But I think that adding Aaron Baines to the starting lineup to trouble Drummond is one of those things that Brad Stevens is so effective at doing, these little moves that make players uncomfortable. The way he guarded Simmons with Horford in the when the Celtics and the Sixers played, there are these little things that Brad Stevens does that are just so impressive the more you watch them. He's a fantastic coach, and that's not me trying to be a homer. That's literally just me being a fan of basketball and watching Brad Stevens as often as I do. The other question is, what is the lineup that closes out the game for the Boston Celtics? Because you hit on one of this really amazing point that Avery Bradley's probably going to draw Kyrie Irving on defense. Now, the next question is, where do these mismatches start? And if you play a guy like Marcus Smart, you give the Pistons the ability to put Reggie Jackson on Marcus Smart. Now, Smart's a good post-up player, but his shooting percentages have been abysmal this year. So there are a lot of really interesting little things that can kind of get some traction and make this game go a different direction than how you think it might go when it comes to lineup choices between Stan Van Gundy and Brad Stevens.
True. And defensively is also going to be very interesting, too, because the Celtics have the number one defensive rating at 95.6. The Pistons have the 13th at 105.9. But in the second half, that jumps up a couple spots, and it goes all the way to 7th with an 100.5 defensive ranking. And they also rank in the top 10 in fewest points allowed off turnovers, second chance points, and points in the paint. So that second half defense for Detroit, they let some stuff go in the first and second quarter, but come right after halftime, they tighten up. And with Celtics having this just scrappy, just tight defense that Brad Stevens has really just kept installed, even with Kyrie here, it's going to be interesting to see how the two offensives kind of work around that,
Yeah, I definitely think that's going to be one of the real questions of the game. There's so much about this matchup that's interesting because it is a potential playoff, a potential probably second round playoff game if you think the Pistons probably fall into that 4 or 5 range, which is probably ultimately where they're going to settle out. This could be a potential playoff preview for us tonight in both games. So which brings me to my last question before I let you go, Corbin. Who you got tonight? Celtics and Pistons first. Tell me who you got.
I have the Celtics taking it by anywhere between 2 and 5 points. I think it's going to be a really tight game. I could see it being a 105, a 102, or 197 type of game.
Okay.
I think Kyrie will be the difference because although Avery Bradley plays very good defense, when it comes down to the clutch, Detroit is still very much a spread the wealth kind of offense. They're still trying to find their go-to person. Statistically, Tobias Harris leads that, but who knows when it comes down to it. And we already know the Celtics are going to play through Kyrie, and he is just so dynamic when it comes. I think he's leading the league in clutch points.
Yep.
I think LeBron is second to him. Yeah, so that's going to be a difference. I think that will separate the two teams. And then between the Cavs and the Sixers, the Cavs, I think, are going to get this one.
Okay.
The Sixers might give them a scare, but LeBron has just been playing so well. I was talking about this yesterday. He's really just as efficient and productive as we've seen. He's career high right now in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. And I don't know if, and this is just for most teams, one player who can really stop him right now. However, the Cavs defense, it comes and goes, been pretty good. So it's been okay. It's been treading water, holding the fort, but it could fall against the Sixers. They don't really have anyone to stop Embiid. That is always an issue. And Ben Simmons is a different look personnel-wise defensively that you can put LeBron on him, but then J.R. Smith really going to stick around all of the screens that are going to be coming for J.J. Redick. How will they defend Robert Covington? Where's Jay Crowder going to be? There's a lot of variables there. However, the Cavs are going for their 8th straight win. I don't see them stopping LeBron. I could see them taking this by a squeaker. I'd say almost like their win against the Hornets, maybe 1 or 2 points.
All right, there we go. We got the official prediction.